What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And today, this video is about an interesting concept that I came across in the Journey of Souls. We're going to talk about that book just to give you a quick overview of what it's about before we dive in. But if you're new to the channel, what this channel is it is an exploration, an open one, by the way, of what life is all about, trying to understand it via research through a somewhat objective lens, as objective as possible, where I'm just going about and trying to read different interesting resources. And a big central component of my research, at least for now, is centered around near-death experiences, hypnosis, etc., where people are able to have some connection with the other side, with the spiritual realm, with the light realm, and then relay back information to us in this physical plane. And I think it's a great place to start from, because if you consider the other side of, hey, well, I was born into a particular religious faith and this is what I'm adhering to, I don't want to hear anything else. Again, all the faiths began by some sort of connection with that light plane, with that spirit realm, some divine connection, purportedly anyways, and then relaying that information, codifying it into text, and then teaching it from generation to generation, etc. So my thesis, basically, as of now, and again, I'm going to be flexible and open-minded as I go along, but my idea is simply that, hey, it would very well make sense that if these connections existed once upon a time, and people are saying on the regular that they're happening all the time via near-death experiences or via hypnosis, and there's a lot of overlap in terms of what people are describing or talking about, etc., I think it makes a lot of sense to do some deeper investigation, and maybe we have a continual and a constant connection to the other side, and we're constantly getting information. We don't have to simply rely on things that were relayed 600 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, etc. So anyways, and not to say that the stuff that is in ancient scriptures and various religions is necessarily wrong, but perhaps there's more to the puzzle. Perhaps there's more information being relayed now, or maybe some information in the past was mistranslated and certain stories got put down incorrectly. We don't have to adhere to everything that has been specifically written at one time just for the sake of, wanting to keep one particular religion as a separate entity, and everything in this religion is true, everything else is false. You know what I mean? So these types of agendas or motivations, I think, don't serve anybody very well in terms of trying to get to the truth. So anyways, that's the overview. That's what we're trying to get to today. We're still new on this channel, so if you got any feedback or anything that you want me to read in particular to continue my quest of knowledge on this front, please let me know. So today's video is going to be about guides, in particular spirit guides. I flagged some really interesting excerpts once again from this book, Journey of Souls. Nearly done with it. So again, it's case studies of life between lives. And what it is this gentleman, Michael Newton, basically via hypnosis, as opposed to near-death experiences. I've seen and heard tons of testimonies of near-death experiences. I'm a little bit newer to the hypnosis aspect of trying to extract this information, but he's got all these cases of different people trying to describe. He's trying to understand not necessarily past lives or parallel lives, but what happens when we're not in the physical realm. What is existence like outside of this physical plane? And it's very, very interesting. So this is from the chapter dealing with guides. So we probably have we're all somewhat familiar, right? We hear it maybe in certain religions as my angel or my archangel, or somebody looking out for me. Maybe it's a relative, maybe it's an ancestor, etc. They're kind of guiding me along. Oh, I could hear this relative or that relative telling me not to do this, or maybe to go do that, something like that, right? I think we're all familiar with this concept. We're going to start with this excerpt first, which I found really, really interesting. This is not from, this is not extracted as a quote from somebody via hypnosis, but this is simply the author, once again, Michael Newton, talking about the role of guides. So he says, one of the most important aspects of my therapeutic work with clients is assisting them on a conscious level with appreciating the role their guides play in life. These teacher entities edify all of us with their skillful instruction techniques. Ideas we claim as our own may be generated by a concerned guide. That's very interesting, right? Again, I've heard other neuroscientists describe the brain as, instead of a piece of hardware, more of like an antenna, Okay, I think this might be still open for debate, but the idea that maybe we're receiving sometimes as opposed to just conjuring up thoughts, I think there can be a lot of validity to that notion. And this just gives us some food for thought again from Michael Newton, that hey, maybe sometimes we have an epiphany or we're like, oh, I need to do this with my life. Maybe it's our guides nudging us a little bit, and why they're nudging us I'm going to get to in a second, but let's finish off this paragraph. Guides also comfort us during the trying periods in our lives, especially when we are children in need of solace. I remember a charming remark made by a subject after I asked when she began seeing her guide in this life. And she said, oh, I remember my guide was with me on my first day of school when I was really scared. She sat on top of my desk to keep me company and then showed me the way to the bathroom when I was too afraid to ask the teacher. So just to zoom out for a second, I talked about this in a different video, but what you'll hear in near-death experiences, as well as through many of the testimonies that are explored in this book, the general idea that we've been able to extract as to, in terms of why we're here. And this is a little bit different than what you'll hear in maybe some particular religions. It's not like a one-time test where you're going to see if you're good enough to go to heaven or bad enough to be tormented eternally. It's nothing that extreme. It's every time we incarnate, and there could be multiple times where we come and incarnate a particular life or a particular role. The purpose is to have certain challenges, face certain challenges, learn from those challenges, and grow. Our spirit is meant to grow as we then pass out of this body and back into that light plane, if you will. So the idea is learning. That's really at the heart of it, and leveling up, raising our vibration, becoming better spiritual entities. And there's a big emphasis in this book over and over about teaching, about learning, and even the hierarchy. We're going to make another video about that later on, but there's a hierarchy of souls, spirits, whatever. And it's like, what you're trying to get to, at least in the part that I've read so far, is the goal is to be a guide, to be a teacher, to basically level up and then help other souls evolve and progress as well. So it's really cool. And me as an educator myself, I work in education. I put great value on being able to communicate and teach and understand emotions and all these things. I place a really high value on all of those skills. And I think teaching is really, really important to me. Being a mentor is really, really important to me. And it seems like guides have a very critical role, whether they're watching from above or whether they incarnate with you and maybe incarnate as a child or a pet or, something like that, some role close to you. Their goal is to be with you throughout and nudge you along, but still let you learn those lessons, still let you go through pain when need be, etc., for the betterment and improvement of your soul. Okay. Another statement that was made in one of these accounts where they were under hypnosis, they said, just to further emphasize the point of the role of a guide, said, I must say, I found souls very loyal to the guides. This is Dr. Newton, and this is the subject. That's why, because they never give up on you. Dr. Newton, what would you say is the most important attribute of any guide? The ability to motivate you and instill courage. And I love that. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know what like teachers, basically, right? Teachers on this planet. I work in education as a tutor. I work with a lot of kids in mathematics, and it's like the same thing. Those same things translate, right? You need to be able to motivate people, instill courage, prop people up, make them feel good. And it's like those things that just like we value here on earth, or if you're a motivational speaker or whatnot, these are the key tenets of the guides. And that's what they're there for, not to save us, not to necessarily even protect us from pain. I think from what I'm gathering as I read more of this, I think pain is part of the process. I think we have to endure pain and have to endure these negative moments so that we can triumph above it, and our spirit and soul can grow as a result. But anyways, their purpose is to give us some guidance and just make sure we stay somewhat on track. I also imagine, this is now just me not quoting anything in the book, but I also imagine sometimes people go off the rails. Maybe sometimes people just have such a difficulty in a particular life, or they endure so much trauma or whatnot. They can't follow the guidance and they really veer off path, and maybe they don't achieve what they set out to achieve when they incarnated the first time. I don't know. I'd love to, once I get more deeper into the reading and deeper into more near-death experiences, perhaps I'll figure out somebody has some sort of an idea of like, hey, the majority of people that incarnate actually do pretty well, or yeah, actually, most of the time it's quite difficult to stay on the straight and narrow and listen to your guide throughout your life, whatever it may be. Okay, now we have another really cool thing about the origin of guides. And what I mean by the origin of guides is I mean this concept, which has been around for so long. As I mentioned, we have this idea of archangels or angels or things like that in lots of other religions and lore. But so it says here, the concept of personalized spiritual beings goes back to antiquity to our earliest origins as thinking human beings. Anthropological studies at the sites of prehistoric people suggest their totemic symbols evoked individual protection. Again, the idea of a personal guide that is guiding you along, as opposed to the actual overall like parental energy that maybe what we consider God or everything, I guess, if you will. So it's, again, these individual guides, and mine is different than yours, is different than yours. We all, or maybe, there's some sharing, but like there's an individual guide of some sort assigned to individual people to guide them along. Later, some 5,000 years ago, as city-states arose, official deities became identified with state religions. These gods were more remote and even generated fear. Thus, personal and family deities assumed greater importance in the day-to-day life of people for protection. A personal soul deity served as a guardian angel, right, like I mentioned, to each person or family, and could be called upon for divine help during a crisis. This tradition has been carried down into our cultures of today. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm sure there are things that have been written down or transcribed, just like in history, just like in life, that may not always be correct, or maybe need some revision, or maybe were mistranslated, mistranscribed, whatever it may be. But then there's probably truth as well buried into ancient texts or ancient beliefs or whatnot. And this could be one of them. It sounds like, anyways, at least according to Michael Newton and in this book, that this idea, this ancient, almost back to ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and maybe even before that, this idea of personal soul deities serving as guardian angels has existed for a long time. And maybe there's some real legitimacy to this, again, as evidenced by these testimonies. All right. Here is a quick religious example of guides, additional religious examples of guides. So we're going to talk about the stuff that's mentioned in this paragraph. We have two examples at opposite ends of the United States. Amakua, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Amakua are personal gods to Hawaiians. And then the Polynesians believe one's ancestors can assume a personal god relationship as humans, animals, or fish. That's interesting. Thought this about my dog, actually. To living family members. In visions and dreams, Aumakua can either assist or reprimand an individual. In Northeastern America, the Iroquois believe a human's own inner spiritual power is called Orenda. Hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is connected to a higher personal Orenda spirit. This guardian is able to resist the powers of harm and evil directed at an individual. The concept of soul watchers who function as guides is part of the belief system of many Native American cultures. Very interesting. The Zuni tribes of the Southwest have oral traditions in their mythology of godlike beings with personal existences. They are called the makers and holders of life paths and are considered the caretakers of souls. There are other cultures around the world that also believe someone other than God is watching over them to personally intercede on their behalf. Look, throughout this investigation and this learning process, I'm going to always be checking in with my logic, with my reasoning. Of course, it's not going to be a perfect tool along the way, because maybe there's certain things that are going on that are beyond our comprehension or just hard to get our heads around in terms of the nature and organization of everything, because we have limited faculties in this physical realm. We don't have infinite knowledge. We're limited by our physical structures and whatnot in terms of how fast we can think. So I'm not saying that logic is going to be the perfect tool, but I don't think we should dismiss logic. I don't think we should look at things and say, well, this doesn't make sense, but it's got to be true. And I'm just going to believe it. And maybe I just don't understand it. I think if something seems really out there and bizarre, I think it's fair to call that into question and then think about it critically, look at other pieces of evidence and other things that people are saying about, the nature of reality, and just like weigh that. That's all we got, is we got our logic, we got our mind, right? That being said, so when I listen to this idea of personal, I guess you could say, coaches, guides, and all working together to fulfill this mission of elevating, some people call it like the vibration of your soul's energy or whatnot. I don't know. It makes sense to me. It makes a lot more sense to me. It's almost like you're coming here to planet Earth. I've also heard in lots of accounts that Earth in particular is a very difficult place to incarnate and live. You could see it. We live in a pretty tough world. A lot of crazy stuff is going on versus other places to incarnate. But it goes along this theme of we come here for a specific purpose, not obviously for material gain, because that's all ephemeral and that all goes as we go, but obviously for something deeper, probably for something that we can develop and take with us if we do believe, which I do, that our energy goes on forever. You know, we cannot destroy energy. So I think just from that basis alone, we're going to go on. So what is it that we're taking with us? The knowledge, the lessons, maybe the things that and experiences that happen to us in this life that are modifying our spirit and our energy, hopefully for the better. And again, with this model of we're all here, maybe some of us elevate quicker than others, and then we go back and we help each other. I don't know. To me, it just, on some deeper level, it feels like it makes sense to me. That being said, happy to do more investigation. I'm going to read a ton more still and continue my investigation, and maybe I'll change my mind later on. Like I said, I'm going to try to do my best to be open and objective and honest as I go through this exploration process. But I thought it was worthwhile to share this notion of guides, what their roles are, and how that fits into the bigger picture of our general purpose of life. And maybe it'll give you some clarity as well in terms of maybe things you've experienced in your life or how you think perhaps it all fits together. So that's it. That's what this video is about, the role of guides, how they're helping us along. You know, it also makes you think sometimes maybe you get a bad feeling, right, about doing something. Where does that come from? Is that just purely instinct? Is that something beyond us that's trying to help us or guide us or push us in a particular direction, right? I don't know. Who knows? It's very difficult to actually figure that out for sure. But when we hear all these other accounts that have talked about these entities that watch out for us over hundreds or thousands of years, it seems like that could be a possibility. You know, it's further backed up by the near-death experiences in this book as well. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think. Have you guys also thought about your potential individual guides? You guys feel like you have a connection, a specific connection with somebody out there looking out for you, maybe a past relative, an ancestor, something like that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But I do find this stuff really cool and really interesting, and I do feel like it's helping me get my head a little bit more around why we're here, what we're doing here, etc. Thank you guys so much for joining. Hit that like button if you did like the video. Make sure to click subscribe if you want to see more from this channel. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.